I think we have over 30 states represented to be on this and learn together tonight. It's really exciting. And if you are slower getting on, there's a great line that says punctuality is a virtue of the board. So I always love that. And you'll see the kind of the bios of the slides of the panelists tonight that are joining us. So kind of keep reading through some of that and get introduced that way. Thanks for hopping on. My name is Travis Fonksness, and I work in the marketing and storytelling space at America's Kids Belong. On behalf of America's Kids Belong, I want to welcome you tonight to our final fostering panel on what does it mean to engage foster care. Thanks for taking the time to join us tonight. Really, really excited for tonight's discussion. At America's Kids Belong, our mission is to dramatically improve the experiences and outcome for kids in foster care. And so this event is part of fulfilling our mission that we work to inspire, engage, and educate folks to consider fostering and help close the large gap between the number of kids in foster care and the number of licensed foster homes. And we want to help current foster families foster stronger and longer. In an age where there's so much polarization and disconnection in our country, engaging foster care offers us as Americans a powerful opportunity to connect and lean on one another in ways that actually weave us together, because we do need each other in this. The writer Simone Weil once said, "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity." So no matter where your journey of involvement with foster care leads tonight, thank you so much for the generosity of giving your attention to this issue as we do this together tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and start a poll, and you'll see a couple of these polls tonight. Grab that for you. Actually, I don't. Here we go. So just take a minute there to answer what brought you on. And then as we do that and look at that, I'm going to give you a few quick housekeeping things. So continue to review the slides as well. I know it can be distracting to listen and watch that, but that's kind of how we're choosing to do this for you visual learners as well. So as I said, tonight's discussion will be recorded and shared on social media. And then also there will be an email going out following this where you'll have access to all the resources, including this webinar. Also, you can use the chat button for your questions and continue to do that throughout the night. Submit your questions that way. I have a lot of your questions already from the registrations that we're going to try to answer tonight at the end, which is awesome. You have some really good questions. And then I'm going to end the poll for a second. And then, like I said, there's going to be a couple more polls popping up. In the follow-up email, you'll have access to some of our other webinars, including ones on the licensing process, thriving, and meeting the most pressing needs in foster care. So some of those other webinars might have some answers too to questions that may not get answered tonight, because thematically that was a fit on some of those other ones. At the conclusion of the webinar, we'd be grateful if you take a moment to provide any feedback so we can create more events to meet your needs and continue to improve your experience. As I said, look for an email following the program. And I'm sorry. And one last thing is we are rolling out a brand new pilot support group in November. And where you can hop in a Zoom call with some AKB staff and other foster parents in kind of a supportive and safe environment to just ask some questions and kind of share how you're doing and what's going on. So that is what we have with all of that. And I would now like to introduce you to our host tonight, Phil Grizzle, Executive Director of Operations for America's Kids Belong. Phil hails from the great state of Colorado and, of course, loves the outdoors. He was a former foster parent of 2.5 years. He's also a bio and adoptive dad of 4 kids. Phil has a huge heart for the vulnerable kids in our country and foster families, and brings his gifts and abilities to help America's Kids Belong create sustainable change in the space of improving outcomes and experiences for the kids and families involved with foster care. That's Phil. Phil, are you ready to roll on taking the panel from here?
I'll do my best. Thanks. Thanks so much for having me, Travis. And I'm actually really curious. There's not one person out there that their spouse does not know they're here. That's pretty impressive on the poll question there. But yeah, thanks everybody for being here, and really excited about the panel that's been put together for tonight. And honestly, just want to kind of position myself, hopefully, to represent everyone here that's coming to this for whatever your question is and learning and that kind of thing. Just trying to take that posture. And I know when I was exploring and kind of engaging foster care early on, if I had this kind of opportunity to hear from the spectrum of experiences that we have here this evening, it would have made a world of difference. So thanks to our panel for being here, and just want to make a few introductions as well, so we can kick this off and get going. I'm going to do my best to use my geography here. We're going to work West Coast to East Coast and have truly the entire country covered. So we're going to start with Dr. Denisha Keating, who's joining us from California, former foster youth advocate, writer. Really excited to have you on. This is your second panel, so thanks for doing this again. Clearly, we didn't scare you off last time, so thank you so much for being here. All right, so moving across the country, Caitlin and Kayla Young. They're part of our South Dakota Kids Belong and our foster parents. You guys have been fostering over 7+ years, and again, have an incredible amount of real-time experience going on right now too as well. So thanks for being here, and excited to hear your thoughts and stories as well. Let's see, then we're going to go to Indiana. Larry May joining us, part of Indiana Kids Belong, and has been a part of CASA Volunteers, and again, just provides an incredible heart and wealth of experience and knowledge in this whole area as well, and has been a very personal journey for him. And then wrapping up in Georgia with Rebecca, and I'm going to say Radici. Did I say that right? Radici? Okay, good. I've never asked you how to pronounce your last name, but thrilled that you're here. Again, an advocate. She's been working over 18+ years in the foster care, child welfare arena, and is an adoptive mom as well. And so, Rebecca, we're going to start with you. Just kind of give us an overview about what's the goal, the purpose of foster care, different factors that go into kind of this whole area that we're going to be talking about tonight.
Be glad to. The ultimate goal is to keep all kids in the best case scenario in a place where they will be safe and to thrive and to heal if necessary. Kids go into foster care because their families are in a crisis of some sort. If child welfare suspects unsafe conditions due to abuse or neglect, then they involve a judge. That judge might give an order if there's concern for removal from the home. And this can happen to kids from being a baby into late teen to 17 years old. It could be a child's first time being removed from their home. It could be their 7th time being removed from their home. But they then go in care of a foster family, and the ultimate goal is reunification with their families. The role of the foster family then is to, during their time with the kiddos in their care, is just to be a soft place to land for these kids in crisis, just to be ready to receive them in love, to help them heal, to have their needs met, and to be their advocate. Sometimes that means just giving feedback on the kid and what they're learning from the child, making sure they get into therapy, to medical care, all those things, just to be their advocate. But during that time, the parents are then placed on a case plan, and they're given supervised visits as long as the judge and child welfare deems it safe to do so. And a child might remain in care for 2 months or 2 years, but the best case scenario is that a child will be reunified with their family. And that happens in about half of cases. If not, if the parents don't follow through with their case plan, or it's just deemed an unsafe situation for the child, then it is possible the child's parents' rights could be terminated, and then they move into an adoption or kinship placement. So that's the gist. There are 4 types of care, just to throw this out there in the beginning. There is foster care, which is a family who's gone through home study and training to be temporary care providers for a child. There's kinship placements, which is when a family member or someone close to the child receives the charge of caring for the child. Kids are also sometimes placed in group homes. And then the other type of care, the other option to be involved in foster care is respite care. And that is when parents who've also gone through the whole process of training and home study and background checks provide respite, just refuge and rest for foster families. That's just temporary relief. And just some numbers is like for Georgia, an example, there's 12,000 kids in care. Nationwide, there's about 400,000. But the goal ultimately, ideally, is for a child to be reunified with their family.
Great. I love this next question. Then, just kind of after hearing that, the question is, what makes a good foster parent? And Catlin and Kayla, I want to start with you as foster parents. What do you think makes a good foster parent?
I would say just being willing. I love to watch the kids thrive once they kind of get settled in your home. It's neat how quickly they become a part of your family, and just being there for them. We have bio kids and foster kids. It's just neat how they just quickly become part of the family. So just being willing and just, being their mom or dad, or if they want to call me Kayla or Kat, and just giving them attention that they need. They might need extra snuggles or a little extra time, and just getting our drinks before bed or whatever, just being willing to be there for them.
I think being resilient and then knowing your why. Why do you get into foster care? Why do you adopt? Why do you get into kinship care? Just because that will carry you for the whole duration of your time taking care of kiddos. So knowing your why and holding on to that.
That's awesome. All right, Denisha, I'm going to ask you the same question. As a former foster youth, what do you think makes a good foster parent?
Someone who's emotionally available. I know for a lot of us foster youth, the biggest thing is we know that people are paid to be around us, and we don't feel like they want to be there. So when you see someone who's emotionally stepping in and saying, hey, I want to get to know you, I want to be there for you as whatever you want me to be, as a friend, as a mentor, or even just a person to listen to you, we know when that person's going to show up, and we know that they're there for us, not because they're being paid to or because they have to.
That's great. Anybody else? Any thoughts on that? Or Larry, I know even from your perspective, just what you think a good foster parent, or what makes a good foster parent?
I mean, I've seen as a CASA volunteer, and we can get more into that later, but I think being sort of tough, not, and I don't mean tough on the kids, but just tough to be ready for what's going to be difficult situations. I think a lot of times as a parent, not just a foster parent, there are more difficult interactions than there are positive and happy interactions. That's just being a parent. And so if you go into it, the idea that if things get a little tough, that you're going to jump out, that's really harmful to the kids. And just be tough with them and stick in there with them when they're not at their best, because they're usually not at their best. Neither are we as parents.
Yeah. I know the foster care journey can often seem unknown. A lot of things that are unknown typically are scary, right? So the next question here is just, Catlin, maybe throw it out to you. Just describe the licensing process that you went through and what you're familiar with relative to just what does it mean to get licensed as a foster parent and how that process goes.
Sure. So usually we start off with some kind of inquiry call. They call to your licensing agent. They do an initial home visit and they talk with you. And then once they feel like would be a good applicant, they invite you to class. And for the state of South Dakota, we have 30 hours of class. There are 10 classes at 3 hours each. And then that class is kind of put together with different perseverance class and some CPR, some medical training, and then a family resource specialist will do some more home study to make sure your home is a good fit, it's safe for the kiddos, that you're compliant, and you're making the right steps to make your home a good, healthy, safe home for your kiddos. And then during that time as well, they're doing background checks, they're checking out you and your family, make sure that you guys are healthy, that there's nothing hidden, FBI checks, all those different type of checks. Anyone that's 14 or older, 18 or older, they're going to look at those, and then they'll look at references. They'll call people around you that know you to make sure that you're a healthy fit. And then once the home is kind of coming along and, you know, passing all those checks to get certified, then you'll have your final home visit, and the licensing agency and your Department of Social Services will have that final visit. You'll kind of check all the boxes off, and then you'll be licensed. And then kind of the harder part is you wait for your first placement. So.
And how long did that take for you? What was the arc of that time frame?
It was like 3 months, because we just did a weekly class with a group for 3 hours. We just had a set day to go in, and that was nice to do it with a group of people who are all in the same boat. So
That's good. Okay. Well, let me throw this out then, just to everybody. I'm sure the various worlds that we've all engaged in, we hear different concerns that people have. What are you finding are some of those concerns, and how do you address some of the common concerns just about becoming a foster parent? All right, Rebecca, I'm going to have you start. You were right there. I knew you wanted it.
For me, I think when I talk to people, when people express concern, I just feel that it's important to be honest right from the start and say, this is hard. Foster care is hard. It is messy, and to not deny that. But to say, most of us can do much harder things than we think that we can. If you are all in and have a big heart for kids, you're going to be able to handle more of the hard than you think that you can.
I think
Yeah.
we feel
I think probably the hardest thing I've ever done is, so I've been in the business world. I've done a lot of things, a lot of different jobs and whatever, but the hardest thing I've ever done is be a dad. Then our third child was adopted, and that was even harder. She was 6 years old, almost 7 when we adopted her. And so hard enough being a dad, it's even harder to be a adoptive dad. And I think it might even be harder to be a mom and a dad in a fostering situation. I haven't done that, but just based on working with people closely there as a CASA volunteer. So as Rebecca said, don't sugarcoat it, but just know that even though it's hard, it's extremely important, that it's probably harder on the children that you would bring in than it will be on you to take care of them. So even though it's hard, it's sometimes the hardest things are the most important things.
Yeah. Kevin, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I think the hardest was thinking about our own biological kids and what their relationship is to foster care. And we end up just finding out it was probably one of the best things we could have done for our bio kids, and inviting them in to help be foster siblings. And man, there's nothing like a bio kid. They speak kid. We don't. We're older. We don't know what it's like to be a kid nowadays, but our kids have been such a huge asset to fostering, and they just help the process. They help kids just kind of relax and tear down those walls of defense a little bit. And so we worried about our kids, but man, we learned that they're one of our biggest assets in fostering.
So I saw this on the chat, and I'll connect it here in terms of a concern, but any advice if there's a couple or people that aren't on the same page? So maybe one person's really wanting to go after this, another person has a lot of reservations. Any thoughts on how to proceed or navigate the differences there?
Yeah,
everybody was just, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, great question. I think you had to find some common ground. So just having questions, like whatever your spouse that doesn't really want to, maybe they're not ready to jump in, but get those questions answered and see where they are. And once you know something, then you can react to it. So foster care, there's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, but all those are answered and met, and then you really know what you're entering into. So, and we don't invite fear to the foster care world or the table. So we're going to get all those questions met, and we're going to go forward once all those questions are met.
Yeah, Denisha.
For personally, I would come back to a question first and say, you know, what are the reservations? What are you feeling? Sometimes we don't understand that when we jump into foster care, it exposes every aspect of our life in ways that we could not imagine. Finances, what we do, why we do what we do. And that's scary sometimes to step into that. But if we ask, you know, what is it that's not wanting for you, not wanting to step into this, and hearing those. There are other ways to get involved outside of just being a foster parent, and that's being like a CASA, an advocate, coming alongside other foster parents. So sometimes it's about first getting exposed to the community and finding ways to get involved in volunteering before jumping in and in that. So if you can get your spouse to maybe do something like being a CASA or watching you be a CASA or getting a part of an organization and just giving back with, you know, finances, that'll help them kind of start to be exposed to what's going on, and maybe the heart will change at that point.
That's good. Well, Denisha, could you just maybe explain or give us a little bit of context just in terms of your experience as a, you know, in the foster care system, and maybe even ways, you know, talking to potential foster parents, how we could move forward and be helpful and healing in the foster care journey?
Yeah, so I was in the foster care system, but also I took in 5 of my siblings through guardianship through California. One of the biggest things that I think we underlook is the value of supporting other foster families or guardians or siblings taking in their siblings. I had a really great church community come around me to the point where I was only making $18,000 a year. But because of their support, they helped me get into from a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment to a 4-bedroom townhome within 9 months and furnished the whole thing. And it didn't cost me a dime, but it was something that when we're being exposed to the foster care community, sometimes it's through a friend, sometimes it's our own experience, sometimes maybe there was a high school friend that went through it. And so we have this understanding that it's not great. But the biggest healing piece to me is, as a foster care kid and a parent who's done this, is that other people are going through the same things we are. And I've talked with a lot of younger foster care kids, and they're now adults, and they just said, I've never felt seen or known or loved or cared for. And I feel like I'm just here floating through life. And then they find a community and they're like, man, I have purpose. I have a reason to be here. This stuff that happened to me has a purpose behind it, and it matters. And I'm not being just thrown into the world and expected to get it. A lot of the foster youth that I work with are trying to figure out just being an adult. And typically teenagers are not wanting, it's not the teenager doesn't want it, but a lot of families don't want to take in teenagers who are foster youth, and then they age out of the system. And that is hard to just be like, hey, you're 15, 16 years old, now you're 18 and you're out in the world by yourself. And so if we can just surround the community and say, like, what do you need? And really it is people. We need people. That is what healed my hurt, was finding that there were good parents out there, that there were people who actually cared for me. And that to me is so much bigger than someone just saying like, hey, good job at baseball, you know, but it being someone who can listen to me and say, that hurt, this sucked, I didn't like this. Can you show me how to open a bank account? I never learned that from my parents. These are ways that have healed me personally, and I think could heal a lot of other foster youth, to say, there's people who have your back, and they're your people, they're your team, and we're here to serve you in whatever capacity that you need.
Yeah, that's really, really good. Well, how about the other side of that coin? You know, being a foster parent and just the support that's needed. You know, Caitlin and Kayla, just talk about just what does it mean, and what kind of support do you guys, or have you experienced that has been most helpful? What kind of support do you need to keep going as long as you guys have gone? And yeah, a little bit of your journey there.
Sure. When we started out, we had our first couple placements. We had people in our community reach out to us, and just having that community and social support. And then it really got exciting when we found other foster parents, and we find other foster parents that know what you're going through, that kind of speak the same language and kind of can see the help button on your face, and understand what you're going through. That was so helpful. And so when we had our community of social support, and then our church coming around us, and a rap team and stuff, and man, like just practical stuff, both Kayla and I, we work out of the home, and coming home to like a ready-made meal on your doorstep, and people saying that we see you, we support you. It was just a game changer. It really changed our outlook on foster parents, that it was a community of people that seen us and seen what we're doing and wanted to support.
Yes, for me, it was cool, like, when the kids, we had, kindergartners, so that's their first year of school, and how much the teachers just love them. And it's neat to see people be inspired, and they're like, how can you do it? And you get to share a part of your story. Support wise, just like my husband said, is like when people show care and are just there and say, hey, what do you need? We even had people like reach out, like, what can we pray for? What can you need? What kind of snacks are your kids' favorite snacks? Or, hey, you guys go out and I'll come sit with the kids, and don't worry about cleaning it up. It doesn't matter, So just, recognizing that it's always busy and stuff, and that they're just there to provide a little bit of rest, or even, like we said, we don't have to think about supper and it'll be ready in 45 minutes.
Yeah, it's there's probably different stats and things out there. I think kind of a common stat is a lot of foster parents don't make it past the first year, and I think the direct correlation between the support that they receive and the wraparound of the different community and partners is a huge part of somebody's journey, or a parent's journey. I know even in our own story, that was many a moment where we were thinking, can we keep doing this? And it was the support around that really helped us move forward and keep moving forward in that, because it is, like we've said multiple times here, it's difficult, it's hard. The reward of doing it is incredible, and it's needed, and it's just, yeah, it's such an interesting tension and balance there. But going in with those sort of eyes wide open and having those different resources is just huge. Larry, talk to us a little bit about your story as well, and just this CASA, different opportunities. Again, we say foster parenting and foster care, and I think sometimes people think about it in a very narrow way, but it, like we've just been kind of alluding to, there's a lot of different ways to get engaged, and your story's played out that way for sure. So yeah, just talk to us about that and different opportunities that you've experienced.
Sure. So I want to do that, but first I want to say that there's probably nothing anyone could do that could more deeply impact kids in foster care than being a foster mom or dad. And in fact, one of the things that has frustrated me when I was a CASA volunteer is that there's so many things I couldn't do that foster parents could. So to me, people who choose to foster children who've been removed from their home because of abuse and neglect, those are my heroes. And if you're on this call or on this webinar and you're thinking about it and you think it might be hard, it is, but don't give up too easily, because that's where the need is. But for me and my wife, our journey began in our 50s when we decided to adopt our third daughter from the foster care system in El Salvador. She was almost 7 years old, and won't go into the long story about why we did that, but we had two healthy, almost empty nested. In fact, we were empty nested for 3 months. Our second child went to college, and then we adopted Deanna 3 months later. But that was sort of what opened our heart to kids from hard places. We began to understand just how hard it is for kids that are growing up without who've been removed or separated from their biological mom and dad. So once we got past some of the early stages of just being overwhelmed by that and getting through that, and we wanted to do more, but with the circumstances with Deanna in our home, we couldn't foster. But we became CASA volunteers, and for those of you who don't know what that is, stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate, CASA. Another name for it in some jurisdictions is is a guardian ad litem, but it's kind of the same thing. And it's basically someone who can advocate solely for the child. So if you're fostering, Catlin and Kayla, y'all, probably some of your placements you've had a CASA volunteer. And so there are things you can't do as parents or you don't have time to do in terms of court appearances and checking with service providers. Sometimes there are numerous service providers in schools or therapy appointments or doctor appointments. And so really what the CASA is doing is trying to advocate for the child and just be sure that nothing gets missed, and be sure that when it comes to court appearances and decisions that are made, that those decisions are made solely in the best interest of the child. So that's really what CASA does. In our case in Indiana, it's a volunteer position. You don't get paid. Some places you do get paid to do that, but as a volunteer, you would be in Indiana. They ask that you commit to 12 to 15 hours a month. So it's kind of a cool way to sort of dip your toe in the water and understand and really learn what the system is all about and advocate on behalf of one or two children. Usually you're just assigned a case or two. And so for us, that was a great place. We couldn't be foster parents at the time, but we could advocate on behalf of children. Because we were older, we always advocated on behalf of teens. My wife would have one or two teenage girls. I would have one or two teenage boys, usually different cases. And so that's a great way to learn about. And so Deanna opened our heart to Kids from Hard Places. The CASA volunteering role sort of opened our eyes to the struggles. We were living in a suburban setting with very little knowledge of the foster care system, or even that there was a need. And as a CASA volunteer, it sort of broke our hearts for our city and for what was going on with these kids who've been abused and neglected. So it was just a real eye-opening experience. It's why I'm doing what I do today at Indiana Kids Belong. And so it's a great place to start. Bill, I'm going a little long. If you don't mind, I'll switch over to one other thing that's kind of completely unrelated to that. And that's
absolutely
one thing that America's Kids Belong does in the states where we in several of the states where we have our work is that we have what's called a foster-friendly app. This is another thing you could do as a business owner. Maybe you're not. Maybe you would not think first that a business could get involved in impacting people in this space, but businesses can sign up and offer discounts to families, services and products to families in foster care through our app. That's a really cool thing. Businesses can also get involved in other ways. You can be a foster-friendly business on the app. You could also have a foster-friendly workplace. I was in the business world for about 35 years, and again, never thought about foster care at the time, but certainly you can have HR policies, placement. So when a parent or when a family receives a placement, offering that family some time off or stipends to cover expenses, or just advocating with other businesses. Hey, have you heard about the foster friendly app? Maybe you don't have a business where you could put a discount up on the app, but other business owners who could. So there are a lot of ways you can engage, either as an individual volunteer, like Tammy and I did as CASA volunteers, but also as business owners. Those are just a couple of examples where you can plug in. I know our website, just a little plug for the national AKB website, but lots of information there on becoming foster friendly. You can go there and see how to do that as a business.
Oh, that's great.
That sound like a commercial?
Yeah. Well, actually, I hope so. It was a great commercial, but it's true and it's good. And I think too, you're right. At least my understanding of this question and engaging it, a lot of times we get narrow, focused on this is the only answer, and it really is a community engagement approach. And even from an AKB perspective, we're trying to expand that and create more of these foster-friendly community mindsets that take everybody across the spectrum of the community partnerships to make it happen. And again, in some experiences, I think the foster parent can feel alone, can feel isolated, can feel like I'm the only one who's going through this. And in reality, it's a whole community of people that are behind you in this endeavor. So that's great. Before we get too far, though, I do have one quick question. Denisha, who was that wonderful person that you brought on screen that we didn't get to meet?
That's my daughter. She just turned a year old. So
she's awesome.
That's my biological daughter. So
very fun, very fun. I'm glad she got to say hi.
She was very
So,
excited. She didn't want to leave.
That's good. So one final question for all of us, and then would love to turn it over to a Q&A after this, so we can begin to navigate some other questions as well. But, and Rebecca, I'm going to start with you, but just, if you had, one person, they just came to you and just said, hey, I'm engaging, foster care. I don't know what to do. I've got some questions. What's the one pitch you would make that person to say, this is why this is worth it for you to keep going forward in this foster care journey, wherever that journey is taking you?
I'd say it's worth it because it's just the good stuff. I'm just someone who doesn't want to skim the surface. I want to go deep. I want to feel the hard stuff and feel the highs too. And so I just would encourage someone to be willing to go deep, to be willing to walk close enough to someone to feel their hurt, but also to wildly cheer when they start to thrive and heal. So I just encourage them, be willing to go deep and feel all the things and be close enough to someone to really support them and what they've been through and the highs and the lows, and just be a safe place for them.
That's great. Catlin, Kayla, how about you?
Yeah, I think just the impact that you create, if you're fostering for a season of life, or if you do it for a long time, when these kids get back into bio moms and dad's home, like the generational impact that you have helped create because you signed up, you said yes, that maybe it was for a few years, maybe it was for 10 years that you fostered, but these kids get to go back to a healthy mom and dad, a healthy home, and they get to live out their life in this new lightness of family, this new family that's been put back together with the choice of mom and dad. And so just the generational impact that you're creating by saying yes and helping out these families.
Awesome. Larry?
I was just thinking of you, Denisha, and what it must have taken from that church and those people that wrapped around you, and the way that altered your trajectory. And so the word that came to mind when you asked that question, Phil, for me is just trajectory, changing trajectories of lives, and where your life could have been, Denisha, and where it is, and just imagining how many people plugged in along the way and what kind of impact that had. So to me, just this afternoon, I spent a little time with one of the kids that I was a CASA for, my last case a few years ago. And he and I were together for about an hour, and we're still friends. And it's worth it. It's just plugging in and seeing lives change. I wouldn't say that all of his outcomes have been great, but I'm glad to know him and that he knows me, and don't have any regrets with having plugged in with him. So just love to see trajectories changed by people plugging in at different stages along the way.
I love that.
Denisha, I'm just curious,
Denisha,
would you say there's 2 or 20 or 40? I mean, how many people have impacted your trajectory through the years?
My church at that point was like 300 people who came around us. But it wasn't the thing that always kind of stuck out was, I had been in this church community for a long time. And, yes, I felt the love, but my sister had said something at that point where she said, they don't know me though. Why are they wanting to help me? I'm nobody to them. And I said, it's because they care. And she had a bad experience, her and my brothers, with another church, that it was like, this was them seeing the church for the first time of what we were supposed to do. So when we step into the communities of being the community for foster care, it changes our life. And it's more than 300 people who it directly impacted me. But I would know where I was going before people stepped in and said, hey, come this way. This is the better route to take. And I was like, wow, I had no idea. But it's impactful. We need people showing us that, we don't have to be what our parents were. Like, not every foster youth gets to be reunified. Not every parent decides to make the changes. So when we come and be the community to someone, we get to show them like, hey, there is a good way to live, and it's this way. So if people didn't do that, I would not be a mom. I would not be a good mom. I would probably continue the generational cycle of foster youth, because it was in my family on both sides for 3 generations, on my mom's and 2 on my dad's. My dad's was more temporary. My mom was permanent. She grew up in the foster care system. So it is one of those things that is passed down sometimes to generations. And so when people come around, it's a generational change that you need to say, hey, this is the direction you can go in. So even you just need one person willing. You don't need 300. But when people come around, you see communities wrap around a family. It's night and day of what you can do to move mountains for them.
That's great. All right, Travis, we're going to turn it back over to you. I think you've been compiling some questions that we can kind of go down some different paths here.
Yes, thank you. Great stuff, guys. This has really been informative and just inspiring to listen to. Before we get into the kind of final segment of this tonight, I'm going to launch one more poll here. So take a minute to look at that. And then as we get started coming up here with our live Q&A, some of the questions we received from you were from registration. In fact, you had some excellent questions. So, and a reminder that you can still submit at any time, and we'll do our best to either queue those up or answer them in the chat. Also know that it takes substantial time and resources to curate the content you've enjoyed tonight, or hopefully has been helpful. So if you stand with our mission at America's Kids Belong and would like to see more events like this, I just ask you consider a tax-deductible donation to America's Kids Belong, and you can use the donate button on our homepage. It should be pretty easy to find. So I'm going to go ahead and end this poll here in a second here. And we can all take a look at the results real quick. So we see a lot of you guys are planning to continue to take your next steps. So that's good. All right. So the format of kind of the remainder of this is, like I said, we've got a lot of your questions that have come in through the registration, and we're going to attempt to really do a good job of trying to get to more of your questions, which means they may not have as lengthy answers as we're kind of walking that balance between trying to answer as best as we can, but also giving room for as many questions as we can. So obviously we could take enormous amount of time on each question if we wanted, but we're going to try to have a little bit of punchier answers so we can just kind of go through to each question. So here we go. We're going to start off. I'm going to feed these out, and then Phil can put them to certain people if he'd like as well. But I'm going to throw this out to everybody. Just a great question of just how do I prepare to become a foster parent? What are just some tips or ideas on that?
Catlin, you want to again start with that?
Sure. I think, I mentioned early on, just, make the start to call, but as you're making your steps and processes, just think about what you would need as a kid, clothing, stuff like that. But also, I think one of the best things that we've done is seek out an established foster parent that you might have a relationship, and to start to ask those questions. And they could probably really speak into your life. So for us, it was just the community. So reaching out to a really good foster parent, a seasoned foster parent, and getting a lot of those questions asked or answered was really helpful for us. So I think it's just surrounding yourself with awesome foster parents.
That's good. The first thing that crossed my mind was just stay curious. I know for me, it was, it probably took 2 years, honestly, from the time that I initially started asking the question to actually getting to the end of that journey. It could have gone faster, but it was more of this one step at a time, stay curious. And I think that's kind of your journey as well. When you're, gather this information, have this conversation, get these people. For me, being solid on the why, was hugely important. And so moving forward, just knowing that this is why, this is why, this is why. So staying curious, but yeah, it's great. Anybody else?
I think one thing to also do is actively be working on your emotions, because we do that is one of the hardest things that I've had to do when I had guardianship as well, was actively be looking inside to say, okay, am I handling this the right way? Am I being lenient? Am I being too much? And being able to go and work on that so that I could be a better parent to those that were in my home.
Really good. Another really good question too that comes in, and this is so it's crucial for some people, and for some families this isn't as big of a deal, but the question is, how do I share our plans to foster with friends and family? And then also, what do you tell a family member who isn't supportive of this? So there's kind of a two-part on that.
I mean,
See,
I was hesitant at first but also too, like my husband says, like, why are you doing this? And like when you choose your spouse, you're choosing to build a life with them, you know, and they're going to be your major support. So not to say, well, like school, don't worry about what other people think, because in the end, I think you inspire more people than you ever would have if you chose to just say no and worry about what other people thought. My father was a little reluctant when we chose this, but then to see like a few years down the road, he's been the papa to them, and he's had the change of heart and stuff. The little girl in our home now just thinks the world of him, and he loves her dearly. So you will impact those people who, because it's just scared of the unknown, and until they see somebody close do it, then they can see the true impact of it.
anybody else?
I think everyone's going to have an opinion, and not every opinion is going to be something you can listen to. I know even just taking in my siblings, which was the right thing to do, people were coming down hard on me about it. I mean, I was 24 and they were all teenagers and I didn't know what I was doing, but I did the thing that I felt was right for our family and the situation. So just keep that in mind, that it's not illegal. So you don't need to worry about it. It's actually helpful. So I always tell foster care kids that too, like, is what you want to do legal? And they're like, well, yeah. I'm like, then everyone's going to have an opinion, and you are the one who ultimately has to decide, because it's how it impacts you and what you would like to do in your mission in life. Not everyone's going to agree to that though.
Very true. We're going to pivot to, I think this was touched on a little bit earlier, but the idea of, looking at fostering teenagers specifically. So for some people, that Denise is already nodding and ready for this, but I think for some of us too, like, teenagers, there can be an intimidation factor. Maybe it feels like we're not equipped just even relationally, or we're not hip enough, or the technology side, whatever it is that scares us. So what just give us a little sense of like what it is like to foster teens, to look at that, and maybe also even some pros that maybe wouldn't think of, like that are some incredible assets teenagers bring.
Let me just say first, no one is equipped to be parents of teenagers, like no one ever. And so that's biological or foster. I've done 3 now, and then been a CASA for a bunch of others, and it's just impossible. So you're entering into an impossible space, and so maybe that puts us all in the same. Maybe that puts us all in the same boat a little bit.
I know I took in 5. I really wanted to hit it out of the park, but they're all different. Everyone's trauma is different. Just because they're teenagers, I think a lot of the misconceptions is like, oh, they're a teenager, they're more broken, they're more traumatized. It's like, yeah, they've had more life, but every child who goes through trauma is traumatized, and each one of them are so different, and you have to get to know that child. But it's some of the things that, I mean, it's a pro, but it sounds silly, but they're more self-efficient. So you get to show them bigger things. It's not just, okay, let me figure out how to take care of them, and let me show them how to take care of themselves. Let me show them how to speak to their teachers. Let me show them, how to get a job. Like, that is super simple things, but it's, getting their driver's license and being able to celebrate that with them. But it's almost harder. I think what we go into it thinking like, oh my God, we only have 4 years, 3 years, 2 years with them. What are we going to make with that time? And that I had to tell myself that often, because I had 19, 18, 15, 14, and 12. I had 9 years with the 12-year-old, but I had 6 months and a year with the older two. And then it was like, okay, how do I help you in the time that you're with me? And there's a lot of things that you get to watch them make mistakes on and guide them and be like, wow, yeah, I did that too. Let me tell you the mistakes I made. That's okay. You're going to learn, but let them fail with you in a safe environment versus on their own. Teenagers are fun and they're hard all at the same time, but so are younger children. It is what it is. But I think there is a huge stigma against teenagers that they're, more dangerous, or they're more aggressive, or the hormones or whatever. I'm like, you deal with that at all stages. You deal with something at all stages. You just got to be willing to show up and try.
Very helpful.
I'll also just jump in and say that just in our work here in Georgia with the I Belong Project, we've watched a lot of families foster and then foster to adopt significantly older teens, kids who are getting ready to age out. And it's just a beautiful thing to watch people help, intentionally knowing that they are going in to help launch kids into adulthood. And it's a completely different thing than getting a baby with diapers or an elementary age kid, but it's just a beautiful, beautiful gift that you can give a child. And I don't think that age and fostering that age can be underestimated, just like everything you shared, Denisha, that even though they're 17 and might only be with you for that short amount of time, what a gift it is for a child at that age to feel like there's some sort of foundation to return to. And I think that's just a special gift and a special time to foster to adopt.
Travis, can I ask a question based on that? It just kind of spurred a curiosity. I wonder, and it's good, anybody can answer this, but Denisha, in terms of your story and what you shared there, how important is the right mindset, I think, to have it in that moment? Because I think, at least the experiences that I've seen, foster parents that have thrived in tough situations and foster parents who haven't, at some level it's support, but it's also just what's the mindset they have in terms of what their role is, what they're trying to accomplish, what it means to actually love and care for a child who's in that stage. And so I'm just curious, like, what's the mindset that you found has worked, relative to a teen and fostering a teen, that kind of thing.
I think it goes back to Caitlin when you were saying, what's your why? My why wasn't just keep my siblings out of foster care, but it was give them a foundation that I didn't get as a foster care kid. If my foundation is a PhD, imagine if they're standing on that PhD, they're going higher. But if I don't even stand on anything, what are they standing on? Is flimsy foundation. So I just kept saying, like, it was hard. It was not easy. and there's a different relationship because it's siblings, but it is one of those things that it's like, if I am fostering at all or being a guardian, I'm here to give you a foundation that you would not have by yourself, so you can go into the direction you want to go in and thrive. And if you keep that mindset of like, that's my why, you're not going to get caught up in, oh, well, they didn't like me today. They said mean things to me and that's not fun. You have fights with other people because they want to get involved in this situation. And it is reality sometimes. And being the sibling, it was a different dynamic. You deal with, normally as foster parents, you could deal with parents and caseworkers. And my level was parents, caseworkers, other siblings, and then aunts, uncles, grandparents. And I had to deal with all of that. And that was a strain, but that whole goal was, if they can stand on my foundation that's more stable, they're going to be able to go further in their own lives versus standing on a rocky foundation over here.
So that's great. Thank you.
Welcome.
And also our last panel 4, and again, you're going to have access to all of these panels. There'll be an email that'll come out. They'll show you all the past recordings. And the last panel actually did specifically really talk about teens, the pressing needs, siblings and teens. So that subject got addressed even more so in that panel. Pivoting on to another question, again, that also has connection to some of the other panels, but is great question. Can I foster as a single person? And before throw that out to you guys, some of the other panels did have single foster parents on, so check that out. And I do know one of the guys, or two of them, have said, so this is just an answer from the past, but was you're only as single as you want to be, was his answer. Community is, that's where looking at resources and really harnessing the power of community and support was his thing. But also, it also for him he felt like he had a lot more relational capacity of just, what looks like it might be a negative is actually, it was spun the other way. So curious, anyone else wanting to add on to that? I mean, but yes, you can foster as a single and be great.
Yeah, I was just thinking of people that I've met over the years, specifically in my church context, that are single, and they're an incredible foster parent to multiple kids in our community. And to your point, I think leveraging kind of their reality, their resources, their time, their availability has been truly a godsend to these kids. So yeah, definitely have seen it be a positive in our community.
Okay, so here's a big question, and really, this might be an all hands on deck. So, but it's sort of, and I've said this before when I've talked about this issue, but I've said it this way, but basically, the elephant in the room with foster care is just this issue of relational loss. As Larry pointed out, teens are hard across the board. They're rewarding across the board, but whether you're a bio parent or a foster parent, there's that issue. What does separate foster parenting is specifically the issue of ongoing relational loss. Kids are going home. They're leaving. They're going back to their biological families, and we celebrate that when it's possible. And some are going to get adopted. Some will eventually age out of the system. But the ongoing, just true elephant issue is this idea that they're going to leave us. So we've signed up for that as foster parents, dealing with that loss and that wounding to us, as much as we cheer on their future. So what are your guys's kind of input or just insights around how foster parents can deal with the grief and loss and sort of just that emotional aftermath, whether it's tips or just whatever you guys want to, how you want to answer on that?
You have to allow your family time to grieve, because it's not just Kat and I, it's Kat and I and our 4 other kids, and they're losing a brother or a sister. So you have to know when to take a break, because that was one of my fears. I was like, I don't want to be burnt out. And we've felt that, somewhat, but we've taken, extended breaks that have lasted almost a year. Just because we needed to, help our kiddos out too and explain it. But also too, you do get to see some rewarding stories. We actually had a friend adopt our first placement, and she was unable to have children, and now we've gotten to see that little girl grow up. So there's reward in that, but you have to allow time for you to grieve, and then you'll know when you're ready. Everybody will be on the same page. We talk to our kids about, are you ready and stuff, and feel where they're at. Yeah, it's hard, but you heal too.
Anyone else want to weigh in?
I think when they definitely leave, there's a loss of identity that can happen. And I honestly equate it to the same thing as like empty nester syndrome, losing a friend, like a best friend, or someone moving out of state and you don't get to see them anymore. And it's it is hard, and you just have to, you do need to work through that. Counseling is really great to work through that, because it's something that you don't expect to have happen. You're like, no, I knew this from the get-go, that they would be coming for a period of time and then leaving. And sometimes they stay longer than we thought. And other times they leave sooner than we thought. But it's being able to work through that and say, you know what, this is a real emotion, and it's okay to feel that. Instead of pushing it off and saying, no, I can't feel that. Like that's just the gist. Because that when we push it off and don't deal with it, we do see a lot of foster families, they get kind of hard-hearted toward it, and then another kid comes in and they don't treat them with care and love, because they're just like, I can't get attached to you. But get attached, let yourself get attached, be all you can be for them, and then work through those emotions and let yourself grieve. It's a good thing that they're going back, but it's okay to also be like, oh man, I miss them. That's not a bad thing.
If I'm being completely honest, one of the reasons we chose not to foster was probably one of the most frequent reasons why people choose not to, is we said, oh, I just can't imagine getting attached and then letting them go back. And so we said that, and that kept us from fostering back in the day when we were considering that. Looking at it now and having worked with a number of colleagues, coworkers, and people in this space that have done it, I think what I've concluded now is that I've never seen a family that's really equipped to handle that and not grieve and not. There's never a time when you say, "Oh, it's perfect now. My family's ready to be foster, bring in kids from foster care, and so now it won't hurt." And it's going to be easy. I just don't think that exists. But and Denisha, I love your example of the empty nest thing. We've done that 3 times. I remember when our son went off to college. The college was 5 hours away, and my wife cried for 5 hours on the way home, and it was very painful. And that's different. It's different than being a foster parent. That's not the perfect analogy, but the point is, the grief is not life ending, and it's healthy. It just means that you did attach and you did some good things. But yeah, I think a lot of folks do ask that elephant in the room questions, like, how am I going to do this and let them go? But looking at it from the outside, looking back now, I can see many situations where people have stepped beyond that concern and gone ahead and done it and been very happy and very thankful to have done
it. If I may add, I think there's a practical way too, like as you're going through this relationship changes, you can still be in a relationship, but you're going to be at a distance. If it's still available, you can still write Christmas cards and birthday cards, and if you got a good picture of them, put them up on your wall and have your kids, pray for them. You pray for them, and just keep it going. Just because they're there doesn't mean the relationship is complete total loss. And so I think continually to be in their life from afar is healthy for you, and as much as for them too.
Also thinking at it as a ministry, we can get hurt in ministry too, but it's that grief that sometimes it happens. Like, it is a ministry that we can be in, but it is one of those things that the reason we're doing it is to glorify God, and then that means we will see them. We just gotta work through the emotion because it hurts.
Yeah, you guys have all given just really great answers from all different angles of that. And I love what you said, Larry, too, of just, if that happened, if we felt those feelings and those hard feelings of loss and stuff, we probably were that place, at least for healing to happen or start happening, because we were that safe place, and there was sacrifice there. So I also think, like, what an opportunity it seems like. I lost my dad just a little over a year ago, and I just remember being in a small group of folks in my life, or a small group, whatever, community, that, they were there for me with the loss of my dad. And I just wonder if that's another, we think of meals with RAP support or ways that people can help us tangibly, but, that also leaning into those close relationships to help us grieve as well. Seems like a great place. So thank you for those answers. I think what we're going to do is we're going to take a final question here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Phil for any closing thoughts or any last questions to you guys before I say goodbye with the final announcements tonight. So, final question for the night is, some people have talked about, is there an income level, a little bit, just curiosity or confusion around just the financial side of fostering. So if anyone wants to speak to just, do you get financial support, or what does that look like to look at the financial part?
Well, we had to fill out like a budget sheet, income coming in and then everything that went out. It basically showed that, we have enough money to take in a child. We have the means to get them where they need to be. As far as like getting like the money from fostering, that could go towards, we did infants for a while, and well, diapers, formula, and everything like that is not cheap. So you buy stuff for their needs, and then also we use some of the money to do like family activities, because when you add people to your family, it's more expensive to go everywhere. So that's what we try to use for that. But also just making sure that they have what they need. And like when we started, we made not like crazy amount of money. We were just starting out, so it wasn't, you don't have to be rich or nothing like that.
Yeah, I would imagine most, states are different, counties are different. You answer that a little bit, but the general approach to fostering is it's a subsidized experience, and they try to cover cost and make sure people aren't losing money out of pocket. And again, every state is going to answer that question slightly different, but I haven't heard of overly expensive foster care journeys. I've heard of people breaking even or slightly subsidizing some of the expenses, but that's generally how that would go, I would imagine.
Guardianship is very different. There is not a lot of funding surrounding that. So that is one thing to be
That's
aware of, because some people have done, instead of doing the foster care route, they're like, oh, I'll do guardianship. And just to be transparent, the only reason I got support was because I didn't make a lot of money. So I got CalFresh, which is basically like food stamps, and some Cal money that allowed me to do what I needed to do. But it was $680 for all 3 of the kids that were under the age of 18. And they said after my income changed, they wiped it off and said, yeah, you don't qualify anymore because guardianship doesn't have that same funding. Sorry. So make sure that before you're going in, make sure that you're understanding what you're taking on. When foster gets more, but it really is a longer process to get some things done, while guardianship doesn't. But really understand that before you go into it, so you're getting the right support.
And I'd say to know that there are lots of resources out there. As Phil said, like here in Georgia, you do get a daily stipend. You can get a stipend for clothing when a child first comes into care, the diaper, the food stipends too, even just haircuts. But there are a lot of resources out there for foster families, from organizations that will provide beds if you're taking in kids, to just all kinds of different resources. So be aware that there's more out there than you might realize that there is. Care Portal, there's all kinds of just different organizations who want to make it easier for foster families.
All right, well, Phil, if you want to close out any of your last thoughts or any other things you want to say to the panelists, and then I'll end the night with the announcement.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and again, I really appreciate the time and effort everybody put into this, and everybody watching and listening. And hopefully we've been able to go after some of the questions and maybe demystify some parts of foster care, which is great. personally, I get most inspired by hearing just the stories and the heartbeats of people. So I think my final kind of question, and I'll just throw it out to all of us at this point, is just, what has been the most rewarding part of engaging foster care for you in your story? What would you say is just the most rewarding experience?
For me, it's seeing the compassion it grows in our own kids.
Nice.
I've just loved engaging with people in this space. It seems like everybody that gets into the foster care space, either as foster parents or as volunteers, or as even paid employees in nonprofits, et cetera, but they're all have a common sort of a sense of generosity and a heart to serve and love kids. And so that's your heart, to serve and love kids. You're going to run into a lot of other people like you.
I think it's an honor just to have a front row seat to watching people push themselves through or use their faith to guide themselves through just really hard situations, from watching foster families say yes again after having to grieve the loss of a child going home, or going through a hard thing with a child, but continuing to keep trying to come up with a new strategy to we do video shoots with our I Belong project, which are kids whose parents have terminated their rights, and we're working to advocate for them. But kids come in on those days just hurt and triggered and traumatized, and you get this. It's been an honor to have an up close seat to watch them, even just during that day, to let their walls down and push through those hard feelings and accept love. So just watching people push through hard things it's a real honor.
I think for me, it's been hearing other people's stories and realizing I wasn't alone, because that is something we tell ourselves, is like, no one's been through this. I'm the only one. And you start talking to other people in the foster care community and you're like, you too? Wow. Okay. It's not just me. But then talking with other foster parents or parents, and then talking with teenage issues, you're like, oh, it's not just my kids. Okay, cool. Like, it helps you feel less alone, but then you start to heal from that, because you're like, okay, this did happen. I can work through this. I can see how other people have gotten through this hard thing. And I can change the direction of my life. And that helped me personally, but then also with my siblings, getting to watch them win. Being good parents, being people who are functional, and just being like, wow, you don't hit the stigma, because we hear all about the negative stuff, but we don't hear a lot of the positive stuff when it comes to the foster care community. So when we get to see those wins, like I would love for people to be like, hey, here's a positive, here's something really cool. They got a C after failing a class, and like us cheering and rallying around them. But we don't get to hear a lot of that when we're isolated and alone or siloed without other foster families. And so getting to see that, we're like, this is awesome. I get to be a part of this community now. And I'm not alone in it. So it's been healing.
That's great. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I think for me it was helping other people find their why, like other people part of the community that come from different walks of life and different influences. And when you have those conversations of foster care, you hear a lot of I can't or I couldn't, but it's what could you do, or what are you able to do? Can you help out a foster mom? Can you help out a foster kid? Could you do CASA? Can you do this? But helping give avenues for people in the community to help out. And it's all hands on deck. It's everybody, lottie dottie, everybody. We need everybody to help out.
Yeah, that's great. There's so many, I think, places and spaces that we engage and we wonder, are we making a difference? Is this really impactful? And in the foster care space, there's no questions. If 100%, it's making a massive difference in the life of not only these kids, but honestly, in your own life. You can't get probably more to the core of what it means to just love and be human, I think, than going after this issue. So awesome. Well, again, thank you for that. And yeah, Travis, any final thoughts for our time here tonight?
Yeah, so everyone gets out a little early, and so out of class early tonight. Thank you guys all for joining us. Thanks, Phil, for hosting and walking us all through this. My last sort of announcement type of thing would be at the very end of this, when we close this out, hang on. There'll be a survey at the very end. You can actually, like I said at the beginning, you can receive a continuing education credit. So hang on for that. And if there's any questions around that, or you missed it or something happens, always just feel free to email us. You've got an email from us, so just follow up with that. And again, thank you for attending tonight. I'm going to end with this thought. I was inspired by this quote, and it feels like a fitting ending. Someone wise once said that sometimes our light goes out, but it is blown again into instant flame by an encounter with another human being. So your presence and involvement in foster care, whether being foster parents, whether becoming a child advocate, or supporting foster parents in some way, may offer those whose lives you touch a chance to regain the flame of hope that they have lost. That's what it means to engage foster care. Thanks so much for joining us tonight and for considering and taking the time to engage this issue. Good night.